right, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Erica. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So, I'd love you to begin by sharing a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Awesome. Well, I am, yes, Lauren Elliott, founder and CEO of Candle Care. And we're a very intentional app-based platform that looks to make mental health treatment that's reflective of Black women and birthing parents' lived experiences accessible and reflective of what they're actually experiencing and where their stressors are really pulling from. So we work mainly with hospitals, health systems, just local healthcare providers to be that bridge and that conduit to getting treatment that's accessible and affordable and inconvenient for Black women and birthing parents. And I'm based in Charlotte, North Carolina, and really in this past year we've seen a lot of growth, and the need is immeasurable at this point now, so we feel like we're needed more than ever now.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, the rates that are recently came out about we knew it was bad, right? Like we knew our maternal mortality rates, we knew our infant mortality rates were bad. And we knew that COVID was going to have an impact, but I don't know if people realize how significant the impact of COVID and the already lack of services that are out there for folks, especially around mental health. I mean, let's be real of how we truly have not collectively grieved all the trauma that we all have experienced through COVID. And now we're on this other side, or I quote unquote on the side, but we're not really on the other side. COVID's still here. But now we have to grapple with, these rates that are even more staggering than they were 3 years ago. And we have to grapple with this maternal health crisis and this maternal mental health crisis that we still are trying to get our legs under to really grapple, to really understand exactly what can each entity do to work together so that we can combat it. So that's kind of where your platform comes in, but you have a journey to get you to get you to this point.
I do.
So I would love for you to just go back and talk about your parenthood journey, your journey to motherhood, and kind of what led you down this advocacy path and really talking about mental health.
So no, thank you, Eric. I just feel like, yes, when I first became a mom, or even just first became pregnant, it was at a time in my life when there were a lot of milestones happening. So I had just gotten married, and here we are having our first child, a honeymoon baby, like right away, and it just had become very stressful. There was a lot of stress surrounding me that I just hadn't paid attention to. So I was just thinking, almost like pushing through all the stressors, not really giving myself room or space or an opportunity to understand this is a change in your life and you just have to embrace it. And I think where I really started to feel like, okay, this isn't enough is enough, is at the time I was working in public health, and I knew how much energy and investment was going into sort of preventing mental health disorders and just like offering opportunities to release stress and get that support. But there were so many disparities happening. So I had pretty much known or gotten very familiar with the maternal mortality rates. And even before that, when I was working in that public health role, I was like, okay, well, there's definitely Black women suffering from these more physical health conditions when they're even trying to get, when they're giving birth, no matter if they're giving birth at home or in a hospital. But there's this mental health piece that I'm specifically a part of all this investment that's going into it. And I'm also seeing disparities there, but no sort of outlet for Black women experiencing birthing, these horrific birthing outcomes. It's like, this has to have some sort of multiplier effect. Like, our mental health is in this trauma of going into these hospitals, not knowing whether you're going to be coming out yourself or you're with your baby, that it has to be having an impact on our mental health, but it's not being addressed at a really like a mainstream level or mainstream way. So I was like, I just decided at that point, and this was well sort of like into my pregnancy. I was in my third trimester, and I realized that I wasn't getting as much attention or just like education on like what to expect just through my pregnancy. So that was a lacking there. And then once we learned when I was at about 38 weeks, we learned that our son was in distress. His cord was around his neck. And we hadn't known really how to handle that information. I would say like that's where I think really the trauma set in for my husband and I, and me personally knowing that, almost like feeling helpless, really. Yeah, actually feeling helpless in that moment, that there was nothing I could do, was one sort of feeling. And the other feeling was this real escalated feeling of like, me being told by a health provider, a doctor at the time, that this is happening. This is, and almost saying it as if it was normal, but to me it was not. But this is happening, and this means that now you're going to be getting admitted into a hospital. So I had already known I was going to give birth in a hospital. So already sort of knowing that I was going to be putting myself in a position that I could be experiencing a disparity or some sort of injustice, racism to some degree, but really pushing past that. So once we were told that we were going to be admitted and really giving birth that day, when we were not planning on it, that's when we had no other choice but to become advocates. And I was able to become an advocate with my partner, like with my husband, and know that there was someone in my corner and I had support in a time of crisis, pretty much. I ultimately had a cesarean. So that was my first sort of, I didn't realize that that was even going to be sort of an option, to the point where I hadn't even, when I was looking at all those YouTube videos, trying to educate myself, because I did not get that education directly. I had to sort of like find it, like most Black women have to do. I wasn't looking at any videos or watching any videos that were preparing me for cesarean birth. And so that was jolting of like, okay, this is what, like me just basically hearing from one entity, the hospital, of like what to expect. This is not the best way at all. So it's really scary. So that is what I would say, where we just became advocates. We're like, listen, this is what we're going to be doing. We were going to be discharged that same day because I hadn't been progressing. My labor hadn't been progressing. And that was the literal moment where we were like, no, we're not leaving the hospital. And we had to tell the doctors that we were not leaving. And that was like my first sort of experience with advocating for myself. I had never been put in a position, I felt like, with my health and health of my baby, and even with my husband, of like us having to say that we weren't going to be leaving a hospital. So that felt very empowering. So it felt scary for sure in the moment of having to say that, because no one should have to say that. You should be able to rely on a medical institution to think about, your best interests. Keep that in mind. Have them have your best interests in mind. But that was when, so there was there were scary moments of it, but then there were also very empowering moments of it, where I was like, no, we're not leaving. And that day, that's when I decided that no, we're going to be creating spaces. I'm going to be a part of creating a space where Black women can feel like they're empowered, feel like they have a voice, be heard, be seen, and have their mental health be thought of just in the same regard as their physical health. Because I also went through preeclampsia with my oldest. But today I have two boys. I have, I'm, so this is sort of fast forward. I'm now, my oldest is 6 years old, and I've experienced things in addition to what I was experiencing there. I've experienced a lot of the same with my second son. And so I've noticed a lot hasn't changed. I noticed that I'm now even like a new person after having two boys now, after having experienced not being heard, not being seen in a hospital system, after experiencing infertility, after thinking that fertility wouldn't be an issue after having my first pregnancy. So I feel like in a lot of ways, an entirely new person, and very informative, and it's definitely made me a better parent and a better sort of advocate, having experienced those moments.
No, absolutely. I think we all end up becoming our best advocates after we've gone through so much trauma within the medical system. My master's thesis was all about Black women not being listened and heard in the healthcare system, especially those who have navigated through loss and infertility. And the overwhelming when I asked that question to, the participants, it was overwhelmingly like, no, like I had to do this, I had to do that, I had to get a second, a third, a fourth opinion for what someone told me. I was demeanored, I was looking down upon. I mean, you keep naming all of the bad things that are still happening in our healthcare system, but then we're continuing to go back, and because we want the outcome of bringing a healthy baby home, right? We don't want to have to go through, we're still going to go through all the trauma, but we want to bring a healthy baby home. So we continue to go back to these systems that really are just not structurally set up to really advocate for us in those spaces. So the other part of that too is that we don't realize the mental health effect it has on us as we go through it, like having to fight literally for your life every time that you go into these spaces. We don't recognize the impact until after the baby comes, and then we're at home, and then we're like, yes, we got postpartum depression. Yes, we got postpartum anxiety. Yes, we have PTSD, because I just went through years of trying to get this baby here. Now this baby's here, and I'm like breaking down. So I would love for you to just talk about like how Candlelit, your tech platform, comes together and really bridges that for us, because I feel like that's a space we don't always talk about.
No, you're absolutely right, Eric. So where I feel like what I intentionally started from with our tech platform is making it very accessible. So not making it a native app right away, making it a web app and making it mobile enabled, but making it very accessible for anyone to sort of go to it as if it was a normal website. So that was one thing. And then I would say, as far as the treatment or the care, let's start from the beginning. So when I was pregnant and even postpartum after having my son, my oldest, both of them actually, I wasn't screened for depression or anxiety, despite that being a heavily encouraged recommendation from ACOG, American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. So I was like, this is where we should start. So I have made digital all the standardized tools that are relevant to capturing things like PTSD, anxiety, and depression. And interestingly enough, there was a study that showed that the current screening guidelines that we have in place don't even capture. So not only are we not really assessing depression and anxiety and PTSD specifically in Black women in a more accurate way, that's why I've started there, so that we can definitely assess when there's depression or anxiety or PTSD present more accurately, but also it's not reflective of our culture, how these symptoms sort of manifest for Black women. That's not usually captured. And also, most importantly too, I would say the aspects of experiencing a stillbirth or infant loss or a miscarriage, we don't even ask about those questions. It literally will only be raised or brought up as if the doctor is aware that had occurred, that the incident that there had been an experience of loss. And so it's just very alarming that we don't even assess in an accurate way, in a way that's inviting and allowing of Black women to be honest, because Black women are less likely to be even screened for any of those: depression, anxiety, PTSD, loss, after either, whether it's in pregnancy or even postpartum. Postpartum is when most of the recommendation is. But we all know through research that these symptoms can be lying dormant and they just be present when we're pregnant, because we were thinking about planning baby showers and a whole host of other things. Like I think there has been also this perception that even pregnancy is all roses, and getting to pregnancy and experiencing pregnancy, there are ebbs and flows. So it's like we have to be able to have systems in place to be able to guide Black women, mothers of color in general, but Black women through these experiences, so that they know that they have resources, they know that they have options, and they don't have to suffer in silence. So we started our platform there. We can screen. We offer, based on the screening, the results, then we offer coaching. So coaching is offered to every mom that is brought onto the platform, whether that's through a referral or they can also just join our app as well. They receive a coach. So there's an assigned coach to help them really determine what their goals are based on the results. So it's almost like having clarity around, okay, here's what I'm going through, here's what I'm experiencing, and making that connection that one would make in a therapy session of like, okay, I experienced this traumatic event, and I am not prepared or have the tools emotionally to deal with these, but I am interested in having those tools. How can I find those tools? And how can I find them in a way where I don't have to wait on a long wait list for months on end, or have to have it be so dependent on affording a therapist, because we know cost is a huge barrier with therapy. So we've really looking to flip therapy on its head a bit and making it more accessible to like a larger group of women, Black women, initially and intentionally, so that we can sort of like really improve these health outcomes, and go into these systems, like you mentioned, Erica, that are not designed for us, more empowered, more of an advocate for ourselves, because we sort of at this point know that we have to be. But then there's even learning there, like how can we advocate for ourselves effectively? How can we feel fine with having to change our providers, our OBGYNs, maybe like multiple times throughout an entire pregnancy? Like that is happening. Like, just I want our platform to be very effective in screening and assessing and offering treatment options that are accessible and attainable, because there's so much happening within Black women groups in our community around birthing experiences that we know about, but there are a lot of instances where we can shine light on like what is actually happening, because it's not all. I think there's a lot of news around our horrific outcomes, but there's not a lot of opportunities to share the stories about how we get to those horrific outcomes.
Oh, that brings up another good point to talk about. Not only, we don't talk about what leads up to those outcomes, but we also don't really talk about the, I'm trying to think of a better way to put it, is how do we, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. It's like, hold on, let me think about it a little bit more.
No, yes, yes, yes.
I mean, I feel like for, because I'm thinking about what you were saying about the loss aspect of it, and that we don't do a lot of detailed screenings.
No.
That when we have these outcomes, we go to the stories, but a lot of folks don't always talk about, like you said, the journey to get there, but we also don't really talk about what are the other, I guess, modalities outside of just regular therapy. Because I think that we preach it and we say that it's there, like, for people to do talk-based therapy, but not always talk-based therapy works for everybody. So I would love for you to talk about just some of the different methods, through your coaches. How do they help navigate people as they navigate through, say someone saw, these stories that are still coming out, or someone who passes away through birth or loses a child, and then they go through your test, your screening, and then they get, tested for whatever the mental health condition is. Yes. How does the coach step them through the options for them? And is talk therapy the only option?
No, that's super helpful because of a way of putting it, because I know, so specifically, I got introduced to therapy when after having my son. And that is why I definitely created the company and the platform, because I knew, wow, experiencing talk therapy after never experiencing it in my entire life, never knowing anyone who experienced it, like my parents or family members, it being brand new, being introduced to me at this stage of life where here I am, I've gone through a pregnancy. I've also, as a new mom, I'm a new mom, just learning from everything from scratch. Not feeling like I have as much support in that journeying of like learning, not feeling like I have an opportunity to learn from mistakes or have those mistakes, not feel a lot of judgment around my mistake making because it's new. The only thing that was able to help me through those moments was my therapist. And going through that experience, I learned, okay, this is what the required work of therapy is. It is to really assess what's happening currently in your life and allow for space to figure out what you could have done to better sort of like experience that, if you had the tools to manage emotions and manage your emotions, because that's all we can control is ourselves. So I was like, this is amazing work, and this is work that's so valuable and that needs to be done. And that was when I was like, oh wow, like not everyone of course can attain this or access this because of all these barriers that they're just, they don't even really make sense. They're all rooted in systemic racism. So I was like, how can we almost like take the tools and the practices outside of these sort of like these dual conversations where it's just one-on-one, but make them feel very accessible, and making sure that they're still effective. So when I decided to start with screening, I was like, okay, screening is the gateway to figuring out what, and it's also the way that we as a population and as a community, we can get a better sense of like what we're dealing with before we learn about these horrific health outcomes. So it's like, okay, let's screen and assess. I learned there were even disparities with assessment because Black women are less likely to be screened. So it's like, okay, let's make that part equitable. Let's assist hospitals and local health providers in that process. When I added the coaching, I was like, okay, this is a person who does not necessarily have to have licensure, but they are having a lived experience. They may be, a lot of our coaches are doulas, or they are either former or current doulas, or they are childbirth educators, and they have lived experiences. They have children themselves. And I was like, wow, there is a barrier to even becoming someone who society deems as worthy of sharing, sharing advice and offering guidance to moms or parents, particularly in this time of life. So I was like, we need mental health support that looks and feels a lot like what our parents, want to receive, and reflective of them, literally like Black women, Black coaches. So that is an intention, is I'm trying to get a lot of coaches who reflect the women that we're trying to serve. And then also there's a program that we're also having. So that it's going to work and it's going to supplement the coaching. So that is also a way to make it accessible and scalable. And that's where the technology comes into play. So it's called psychoeducation. It's basically like mental health education. So how can we take those tools and practices out of those therapy sessions and supplement the coaching, which is also sort of like having an experience, a human connection. How can we supplement the human connection that you can get from therapy with education that you would normally receive perhaps as homework if you have a therapist who offers homework, but some therapists don't. So it's like, how can we make how can we streamline what that support looks like, but make sure that we can still be effective in a way where parents are still learning those tools and not having to face these barriers of cost, and a provider needing to be licensed in your state, which is something that I experienced, and these arbitrary sort of barriers. And so that is the intention of our entire platform, is to screen, assess, coach, and then offer this 8-week program, which has an audio component and offers parents a way to listen to how this is the history of birthing in the country. It's almost like an auditory Black birth experience that supplements the coaching. And my goal is to show the effectiveness and the impact that all of those different aspects, when we're working with a hospital or working with a partner, that this is all needed, and all of it at once is effective and important, because we need to know what is the root of the disparity, measure that disparity to even be close to solving. So I know, when we're thinking about these outcomes, it's like, how do we get to these horrific outcomes? It's like knowing for sure, like you said, knowing what happened or what led to those outcomes, but also like investing in the nuance between where they started, the root cause, and how we get to an actual empowered, mentally well mom, despite what her lived experience could be, because we know there's so much variety. But it's like, and that's why I also called the company Candlelit too, because it's off of a quote of like, one candle doesn't lose flame by lighting another. We are going to be supporting all parents no matter what they've experienced, but definitely Black women and their lived experience. We have an intention on initially, we have intention on specifically focus on Black women, because we just don't have a lot of spaces where we can experience what motherhood looks like, or parenthood, or just the birthing, even trying, like the birthing experience, whether you are trying to become pregnant and are experiencing infertility, whether you are pregnant and you become pregnant and have the sort of blessing of that, and what that period after you've given birth looks like, because a lot of people like to say the fourth semester, the first trimester, and beyond, but like that period after birth, we know that's where these horrific outcomes are really deriving from, is that period right after birth. So it's like, how can we how can we guide that continuum of care? And really, I'm focused on like systems level change, so that, like you mentioned, that these systems that we're going into, I think like 90% of births that occur in the country are still in hospitals. So we're seeing all these wonderful, our strong Black women and counterparts and friends and family members giving birth at home. God bless them, but not everyone. Like, I wasn't a candidate for home birth. We're not all, as Black women, of course, we know we're not a monolith. So it's like, I want our platform to be able to be nimble and adapt to no matter what your story is. And my background's in journalism, so I'm I'm always very inspired by stories of Black women and what they've gone through and what they had to persevere. And then I know that our strength is really in our support of each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's really like, how can we? So that's been like the core of the platform that I've been building.
Oh, no, that's amazing. And yes, we typically don't qualify. For those who listen to this podcast, we don't qualify for home births. It is what it is. I always tell people that, I'll just like, it's for the lower risk folks. But if you're listening to sisters-in-laws, more than likely you're not going to qualify unless you go talk to your doctor and your midwife, just because of, if you have any outstanding underlying conditions, if you've had miscarriage, if you have fertility challenges, it's very difficult for them to qualify you for home birth or birth outside of that space. It's very difficult, but we still are birthing in hospitals. We're still in these systems. We're still fighting. So I'm so happy that that your tech platform, Candlelit, is able to really help us navigate those screenings. Because I always say that we don't have enough screenings for us who are going through the journey, the fight to become mothers, literally fighting to become mothers. And we don't screen enough in pregnancy. And I think that is even more critical for us because of how long it took to get pregnant for many people. And then once you get pregnant, you're like, Lord, can I stay pregnant?
Yes.
And then, can I bring this baby home from the hospital? So I'm happy that this is kind of helping fill that gap, and then giving you coaches, giving you tools, taking you through this journey. So when you see these outcomes, you aren't startled by them. You don't think that you're going to be another statistic. You have the education to know exactly what you should be doing as you handle and navigate through the journey. So that's amazing. So where can we sign up? Where do we sign up? Give us all the deets.
Yes, thank you, Eric. So we are at candleitcare.com. You can create an account. You can actually book a session with a coach right away and just kind of like jump right into our experience, which we are encouraging. I'm encouraging, please do that, because we need the more parents, more Black women who can engage in our experience, the better it can be. So please do feel free to find out more about us there. We're on social media at Candlelit Care and Candlelit Cares on Instagram. And yeah, please feel free to reach out to me directly if I come up in your news feed or your any feed that you come across. Please do find us at candleitcare.com, and appreciate that. Thank you so much, Eric, for the time and offering this platform. Yes, thank
absolutely.
you, your listeners.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to leave everything in the description box, but yes, you all go grab this. For my doulas who are listening, my birth workers, folks who are out there, definitely add this to your toolbox, because I think this is a great resource to send to clients too, to say, hey, this is another tool that's out there that you want to make sure that you use, because this can step people in the right direction on where they need to go, especially for those people who may not be able to afford your traditional talk therapy. Because I think that we still have a barrier on both sides. We have a barrier for getting Black therapists. We got a barrier just to get therapy.
Yes. And Eric, real quick, because I love the point about the doulas. Yes, we actually are going to be training New York City doulas starting next month, right before Black Maternal Health Week, on perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. So it's a mandatory training. So we are now in the in the space of training doulas and really wanting to make that partnership come to life between us and doulas, and having them feel like they're very much equipped in these instances where they may experience a mom or a client who is experiencing a mental health episode, but they don't quite know what to do. So please look to us, as well as if you are part of an organization who invests in training. we can also be helpful in that way too. But yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Erica.